Toronto, Canada's largest city and one of the most multicultural cities in the world. And as the world faces huge environmental challenges, a collaborative approach is being called for to address our shared environmental problems at regional and global levels. And that's the transboundary theme of this year's annual meeting: Great Together, Separate Challenges and Collective Solutions. It's the SETAC North America 40th Annual Meeting, and you're watching SETAC TV. Welcome back to SETAC TV and our last programme from the SETAC North America 40th Annual Meeting. Well, as scientists gather alongside representatives from government, industry and the non-profit sector to discuss the very latest issues from aquatic toxicology to environmental risk assessment, here at SETAC TV we'll be bringing you the very latest from the meeting and further afield. Today we'll be focusing on diversity as we hear about the new Inclusive Diversity Committee and drop into the ever-popular Women in Seatac Luncheon. Plus, we'll be discussing the very latest in the field of PFAS. First though, I sat down to have a chat with three experts who are all participating in sessions about PFAS. Well, flick through the pages of this year's programme and you can't fail to miss that a really hot topic is PFAS here. And it's becoming a growing concern. So I'm delighted now to be joined by three scientists to tell us a little bit more. Mark, Amelia, Gary, thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Amelia, maybe you can just give us a very sort of short summary on what PFAS are and what we mean by that.
Sure. So PFAS are polyfluorinated alkyl substances, and they've been made since the 1950s, 1940s even, and chemically what they look like, they have a perfluoroalkyl chain, so a CF2 chain. And these have been of concern because they are persistent, they are ubiquitous, and they move up food webs. And so back in the day they were called PFCs, and we've recently moved to the PFAS terminology, PFAS. To avoid confusion with other substances.
And where do we find these PFAS?
They are everywhere. They're ubiquitous. So they are in every environmental compartment. They are in human blood all around the world, all of the continents, ocean water, freshwater lakes. If we sampled your drinking water in your home, we would find them there. If we sampled your blood, we would find them there. If we sampled your pets, the dust, everything, they're around us everywhere in this room. We're breathing them in right now.
And we'll come to the impact of them in a minute, but the study of them, Gary, is that growing in speed and momentum?
It definitely is. People have been aware of PFAS in the environment for some time, but the recent interest has been primarily associated with human health issues and drinking water exposures, where there was a realization in certain places that these exposures were pretty significant and approaching levels that might be of concern from a health perspective. But also in the last year or so, there's been a lot more concern about the potential effects of these on components of the environment as well. So wildlife, fish, even plants potentially could be affected by these chemicals, and we're just starting to think about how we might look at this.
Well, let's just quickly talk about those impacts then. Mark, what sort of impacts are we seeing on human health from them?
That's a good question. The data aren't very clear. There are some epidemiological studies, but they're cross-sectional, and so they really don't show cause and effect, just some correlation. And so we see some effects to the liver, some effects in terms of higher cholesterol, which is actually opposite than the mammalian-controlled animal data. Could be due to things, and there have been some postulations that maybe reverse causation is the reason for some of these effects that we see in terms of high cholesterol. Maybe that the people that we're seeing high serum concentrations of PFAS is because of reduced glomerular filtration rate that could be due to other causes, for example. But effects are seeing thyroid, rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis has been associated with high serum titers of some of these compounds. It's important to know that a lot of these compounds are incredibly variable. There's branch, there's linear isomers. It's over 4,000 different chemicals. Some of these are polymers that have very short lives that aren't really bioaccumulative. Some of them last a long time, as Amelia said, and are bioaccumulative. So it's It's a really hard group of chemicals to get your head around because they're so variable in the effects that they produce and their kinetics.
And Amelia, we just heard about the human health aspect. What about the environmental aspect that Gary was alluding to as well?
So the biggest concern about PFAS from an ecological perspective is their persistence. So even some of the things that are less persistent will degrade into PFAS that are persistent. And although the acute toxicity ecologically is quite low, the fact that they're persistent, they will build up in the environment, and we have various environmental sinks for them, that is a concern. So we have some acute toxicity data, we have some chronic toxicity data, but still the toxicity data is emerging. So we're looking at developmental toxicity, tests where you're exposing the first generation of fish to the chemical and then having them reproduce and looking at the offspring. And we're actually seeing quite significant effects in the offspring, including mortality, that you're not necessarily seeing at that same dose in the parent generation.
So it sounds difficult to measure these impacts then, Gary?
Yeah, it's a challenge two ways. First of all, they're difficult chemicals to test sometimes because they have very diverse properties. But even more than that, the sheer number of them is challenging for us in terms of having adequate resources to do enough testing using conventional test methods. And so people are looking at different approaches, both analytical chemistry approaches and biological approaches, where we can look at the properties of a lot of chemicals quickly to try to decide which of this large universe of chemicals should be our priorities for in-depth investigation.
What would your key takeaways be, Mark? What would you like people to leave the meeting thinking about going forward?
Yeah, an important thing that we needed to do was to all get together and find out what's the state of science now and where do we go from here. And so recently we had a Seatac focused topic meeting in August in Durham, North Carolina to discuss that. What is the state of the science and what we know about the environmental effects, exposure, characterization of the risk, and so forth on these compounds, and then actually break out in groups later and try to see what are the big things that we need to learn more about. And so we just had that recently. We're going to try to publish those results, and we think that'll help us develop a roadmap on how to move forward on characterizing the risk from these compounds.
Fantastic. Gary, would you like to add?
I'd agree that meeting is pretty seminal in terms of getting together the experts, finding out what we don't know, summarizing that, but most importantly talking about where we need to go and how we might be able to get there in those various areas, exposure and effects in humans and in wildlife.
And Amelia, what would your takeaways be for
My
people?
takeaways would be that PFAS as a category are such unique contaminants, and everything we know about other contaminants doesn't necessarily apply. So we really need a creative perspective on how to approach these substances. Seatac has been a wonderful forum for PFAS research since the early days, and much of what we know has emerged from this meeting historically.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to hopefully catching up on this next year maybe, and we'll see what's developed from then. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, in just a moment, we'll take a look at the work of Procter Gamble and how they're improving more consumers' lives more completely and in more parts of the world. First though, here's a taster of all the features that you can catch on SETAC TV all this week.
Procter & Gamble has a long history of innovation. It serves about 5 billion consumers with personal care and consumer care products globally. We have a long history of innovation in the personal and care space. We've been working on animal alternatives since the 1970s. In the environmental safety area, this is a relatively new question, one that really began to form in its present shape around the 2000s. This is now a consumer need. It's a societal desire, and we've invested very significantly in trying to devise assays that can address these questions. Safety is at the heart of everything we do.
Safety is really three parts. It's objective safety, it's perceived safety, and it's regulatory safety. And we do our best to make sure that we are advancing the science and that we're being transparent and we're being good communicators with the science, so we can assure the public that we're doing our best and that we really understand the compounds and the risks associated with them.
The consumer expect our products to be safe, and we also must make them safe for the environment as well.
P&G has a long and storied history in really advancing the field of environmental safety and risk assessment. And I've been drawn to really practical applications of trying to advance the science. We build the basic foundational science to advance this work.
Procter Gamble works with scientists from academia, across industry, and scientists within government as well. This so-called tripartite approach is fundamental to making progress in defining what safe means and the data behind making safety determinations.
Over the years, my work with Procter Gamble has been in a variety of areas. We started out in the mid-90s working on different experimental techniques and experimental designs to provide better testing for effluents and chemicals. And then through the 2000s, we've worked with P&G on better experimental designs, better tests.
In the effort to be more sustainable and to reduce animal needs for testing, this is something that we all have to work with together. This isn't just something that P&G does on its own. This is a partnership with government, with academia, with other industries, in order to understand the science that's needed to replace animal tests. But we can't do this in a vacuum. We need to have our tripartite partnership in order to make sure that we are developing a robust environmental safety assessment, and that what we are developing is something that everyone agrees is safe and is repeatable and is reliable. It doesn't mean a lot coming from just me. It means a lot more coming from our regulator partners and coming from our academic partners as well.
We have always been interested in devising assays that are more informative than the ones that we presently use. And in animal alternatives research, this is no different. The fish embryo test, or FET, is an animal replacement assay. It uses developmental endpoints that are tied directly to whether the fish will survive later on as a juvenile in development.
P&G uses alternative methods like the fish embryo toxicity test to understand the environmental hazard of compounds. We can use this test and the results from it in order to guide business development and make sure that we are moving towards a more sustainable and safe space. And we can also use this information in our product registration and environmental risk assessments.
The future of animal alternative assays is actually very exciting. There are many things that are on the horizon that will improve what we can do for predicting environmental safety.
With fish and animal alternatives, with people in Procter & Gamble and HESI and other organizations, really I think has done a lot to help the world understand how to do assessments and protect the environment in an ethical and meaningful way that provides safety and science-based decisions on how to do work in the environment.
We're often sought after for our ability to partner with our analytical capabilities. People will think of P&G and say, I want to collaborate with P&G because they have world-class toxicologists and they have this incredible chemistry associates that they can work with as well. And they're just right down the hall from us. So when we're developing a test, I can have those conversations with chemists, and then we can have the conversations from the testing side of things. And together we can work to build a phenomenal testing strategy that leads to robust data generation for our risk assessments.
If not for Seatac and its tripartite relationships with government, academia, and industry, we would be in a very different place than we are right now. My collaboration with partners in industry and in government have really helped the environment in meaningful ways.
We can do so much more together than we can alone, and for sure Seatac has been an instrumental part of shaping environmental safety sciences today. We consider ourselves leaders in the field, and we continue to work to help shape the right ways to answer the most important questions.
One of the unmissable events at the SETAC North America annual meeting is the Women in Seatac Luncheon, and I've got myself a special SETAC TV ticket, so let's go and take a look. Hi there.
The Women in Seatac Luncheon is a really great place to meet other women in the society, and as a student it's a really great place to meet women who are incredible role models. Obviously this is a conversation that needs to involve everybody, not just women. So I think if we can continue to move forward in that direction and include everyone in this conversation, I think that we will continue to make progress. So I'm really excited about meeting other women, hearing what the speaker has to say, hearing about other women's experiences as scientists.
Internationally recognised as a Canadian thought leader in the area of equality, diversity and inclusion in STEM, Imogen Co has advised on best practice in this area and contributes to the national dialogue about these issues.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm so impressed by this room, I really have to say. Embracing diversity, embracing dimensions. I use the term dimensions because that is Canada's version of the Athena Swan program, known as Sea Change in the US or Sage Pilot in Australia, which seeks to affect cultural change in academia specifically. And so it's really about embracing diversity as a way of leveraging talent.
I think the key messages are to face the uncomfortable truths and start having the discussion about how can we build a more inclusive research culture and more inclusive science, and be brave and acknowledge it's hard work and it's scary, but yes, we can do it. There's a huge appetite for change and a huge appetite for more inclusive environments. People want to be included, people want to have their voices heard. I don't think we're as skilled as we need to be in terms of knowing how to actually put that into practice. I think if people would go home to their environments, reflect on their own situations and figure out what they can do in their own context, that would be a win for all of us.
She really hit on some of the high notes on equity and diversity, especially in academia. Me, coming from academia, I thought it was really great. We got a lot of great discussion in the room. A lot of people brought up a lot of things that may be a little uncomfortable to talk about, but I think it was great.
And this has really brought attention that people of marginalized communities, if you're just focusing on one, they can still slip through the cracks. So it's really important in diversity to kind of incorporate all aspects of diversity. So yeah, I thought it was really good.
Let's head over to Japan now to take a look at the work from the Centre of Health and Research Risk Assessment, where they're researching state-of-the-art science to help support the goal of achieving sound health of the environment worldwide.
The NIES is the leading institute of environmental science in Japan, and our Center for Health and Environmental Risk Research is in charge of scientific research to help realize safe and secure societies. The center conducts research on development of advanced ecotoxicity testing, analytical chemistry for environmental monitoring, environmental fate analysis and modeling, and exposure and risk assessment. The center also conducts research on environmental health research field on the impact of chemicals on the human health by toxicology and epidemiology. The center consists of researchers from a variety of backgrounds. Those include chemistry, biology, mathematical sciences, environmental engineering, toxicology, and epidemiology. We developed a GIS-based multimedia environmental fate model that covers whole Japan with verifying geographical resolution. The model can simulate environmental level distribution of chemicals over Japan in each river segment. The model is now a major tool of Japanese official chemical risk assessment.
My area of expertise is to develop environmental fate models and emission estimation methods for chemicals, including environmental risk assessment based on these results. I developed the pesticide chemicals high resolution estimation method named PECREM It is used for estimating spatially and temporally variable emissions of various pesticides. We are also developing the grid catchment integrated environmental modeling system named GSIMS. The GSIMS model is a multimedia fate model. It was basically developed for simulating organic pollutants. It has multimedia compartments such as the atmosphere, a subsoil layer, river and lakes, sea, and sediment with high spatial resolution. Anyone can download this model together with a user interface tool and input a dataset for whole Japan from our website. The model can show concentration maps and environmental concentration distributions, including these temporal trends for each medium. Importance of effective and efficient risk assessment is increasing because many new chemicals are produced day by day. It will be more important to grasp the environmental levels of each chemical in low cost. I think multimedia fate model like GSIMS model and emission estimation method are key technologies to achieve this goal.
We are working on the development of new testing method for ecotoxicity of chemicals. One of them is a Berger method for endocrine disrupting chemicals and transgenerational impacts.
My interest is in ecotoxicity and ecological risk assessment of environmental contaminants such as pharmaceuticals, surfactants, and pesticides. We collaborated with the US EPA to develop MEDACA Extended One Generation Reproduction Test, which was approved as OECD Test Guideline number 2450. This method takes almost 6 months but has extremely high sensitivity to detect the maternal transfer of the chemical and reproductive effects. The flow-through system was built to maintain the concentration of the chemicals to conduct the long-term fish toxicity testing. All the instruments are made of stainless steel, glassware, and PTFE to avoid the background contamination by the plasticizers, which is suspected as endocrine disruptors. We have contributed to the chemical management in Japan, such as chemical substances control law, by the supply of testing organisms, such as fishes, crustaceans, and aquatic plants.
Another important achievement is the new introduction of comprehensive analytical schemes in variety of applications of environmental monitoring.
I am conducting research on grasping hazardous chemical substances in the environment by integrating chemical analysis and bioassays. I also conduct research on environmental monitoring methods to be used when chemical substances leak during the disaster. AIQS, called AICS, stands for Automatic Identification and Quantification System. AICS enables the identification and semi-quantification of substances without the use of target standards by adjusting the GCMS conditions. In addition to about 1,000 substances that can be measured at present, we are updating the database so that more substances can be measured. The molecularly imprinted polymers, MIP, we are developing mimics nuclear receptor such as estrogen receptor. Once this MIP is completed, it will be possible to efficiently extract and purify estrogen receptor binding substances from environmental water. In parallel with this, we have just started the development of MIP that collects thyroid hormone receptor binding substances. In the future, we hope to be able to build a system that can detect environmental changes and identify the environmental impact contaminants rapidly.
We will pursue the upgrade of ecotoxicity testing methods and investigation on the environment using several assays. We will also continue working on bioinformatics to contribute to the development of AOP, and IATA.
Our center will try our major effort to establish innovative science that supports society for sound and safe use of chemicals in the world.
Well, in today's programme, we've been talking about diversity. Earlier, we went along to the Women in Seatac Luncheon, and now I'm delighted to be meeting two of the co-chairs of the recently approved Inclusive Diversity Committee. Austin, Latonya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So could you give us a little bit of background, Latonya, let's start with you, about how the committee came about and what its aims are?
Yes, so I've been a member of Seatac now for about 10 years, and Austin around the same time. And coming to Seatac, I noticed that every year I was looking for someone that pretty much looked like me in one way, shape, or form. There are other scientists out there that do this work, and that are not coming, and I would love to see, you know, more scientists come that are from different backgrounds. How do we get that started?
So Austin, what's the kind of remit then of the committee? What are you hoping to achieve with it?
Mainly what we hope to achieve is, as our society changes and hopefully catches up to being more modern, we understand that scientists come from all shapes, sizes, different forms, and different backgrounds, and mostly within different societies you just notice one demographic, but that's not truly representative of the scientists that are out there. And so mainly what we want to do is hopefully at some point within Seatac we notice that we are more reflective of the community that we serve, and we see people from all walks of life, different shades, different backgrounds, and also hoping that people understand that it doesn't matter what your choices are in your life. You're still a person, you're still a human being, and those things shouldn't dictate what someone does to you, how you should be treated. And you should also be considered whenever we have, say, an annual meeting and there's just things as far as childcare or accessibility, or people that actually can do sign language for people that may be hard of hearing, things that maybe I wouldn't consider a talk about, but now that it's been brought to my attention, I can't help but address those things. So.
And what kind of response have you received?
It's been generally positive for the most part from a lot of scientists and a lot of young people within the society. And I think that's what's awesome, because we're the future and we're the next generation, and what we do now is going to have impacts years later. So seeing that there's such a positive reception, it helps me know that in the years to come, this society and this committee is going to keep growing.
Being so new, have you got a lot of momentum with the committee?
We have great momentum. And we started off with our kickoff for the Inclusive Diversity Committee last year in Seatac in Sacramento. And, you know, we started talking about it. You know, we told people our stories at Seatac and what it felt like to be us at Seatac. And we had, oh gosh, over 180 people signed a banner in support of it. And we had about 75 to 80 members sign up to be members of the Inclusive Diversity Committee. And since then, I mean, the board has been supportive. We've had a lot of support, a lot of momentum. It seems to keep growing.
Best of luck with this initiative and with the committee. It sounds fantastic, and we're just so delighted that you could come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, there's a really broad range of social networking events that takes place here at the annual meeting, but I'm sure that none of them is as energetic as the 5K fun run which took place earlier in the week along the Toronto waterfront. Now, if you didn't manage to go and join in, here's what you were missing. Now for our last feature of the programme, let's find out how the ICL Group is helping to support customers make better choices when choosing flame retardants.
ICL is a global fertilizer and a specialty chemical company. It's one of the largest flame retardant producers. We make brominated flame retardants, phosphorus-based flame retardants, and inorganic flame retardants based on magnesium. The primary source of minerals for ICL is from the Dead Sea. It's rich in minerals, so it's rich in bromine, and then we also make derivatives based on bromine near the Dead Sea in Israel.
Flame retardant chemicals are additives which you add to combustible materials. It can be a natural material like wood, paper, or to the plastics. And these chemicals, they prevent ignition of the combustible materials, or they help to limit spread of the fire. They're used mostly in electronics, in building materials, in textiles, transportation. We're surrounded by materials which are very flammable, and we need to protect them.
The values of developing sustainable products is important from the early stage, from the discovery stage, as we use these green chemistry principles, develop products that are more sustainable, environmentally friendly, and also processes that become sustainable and environmentally friendly.
ICL's approach to dealing with materials like flame retardants is fairly unique in that they have not only constructed materials and taken, some effort to look at the impacts of their products, but they've actually taken an umbrella approach at designing and developing tools and an infrastructure to help customers evaluate what are the product choices for different applications. And I find that very, very unique in the industry to be actually, reaching out to the customer and providing tools to help assess the different possibilities and different choices.
The SAFER is a tool that takes into account all the health, safety and environmental properties of a product. And it also takes into account the exposure profile of the intended application. And what it seeks to do is to match up the exposure against the health, safety, environmental properties so you can select the most appropriate flame retardant. It takes into account the price, takes into account the properties that you require, and make sure that the end consumer is protected and gets the most suitable product.
From the green chemistry perspective, looking at the SAFER tool that ICL has, right now it is focused pretty much on the types of products that ICL sells. I see that general approach being applicable to a much broader industrial audience, and I hope that in the future we see ICL's tools and methodologies find its way into different industry sectors, because I think it's a very, very useful approach.
By developing new flame retardants, which are polymeric, big molecules by nature, or reactive molecules which will react with the matrix where they stay, we strongly believe that these molecules will stay where they are. They will not escape into the environment, and this will significantly decrease environmental footprint of flame retardants.
ICL is working very hard toward low chemical or environmental footprint and to provide sustainable products. So for example, we have a new flame retardant, Polyquel P100. It's a flame retardant for electronic applications. We can make that compound using solvent-free process. We cut the cost of this product, and this product is also low in chemical footprint. So I think this product is very beneficial to both our producer and also our customers.
Yeah, at ICL we're very focused on the circular economy. SAFER is just one part of what we're doing. In Europe we have a plant now which is actually recycling insulation foam, and it's allowing the styrene to be recovered and to remake polystyrene, and we recover the bromine and we can make other bromine compounds from that. If you make the right selection of flame retardants in your product, then they will be suitable to be recycled once, twice, 3 times as many as you need. And circular economy is undoubtedly the future for the plastics industry.
The vision is to work across boundaries and develop products that are useful and also sustainable.
From the perspective of a practicing chemist, ICL has a leadership role it's playing in flame retardants, specifically because of this SAFER program that they've generated that helps customers evaluate different product options and weigh them against pluses and minuses in performance and safety. And I see that as having no peers in the industry for that kind of a program.
Some really innovative approaches there from the ICL group. Now, I'm delighted to be joined in the SETAC TV studio by one of the co-authors of the paper which has won the ET&C Paper Award. Amanda Berger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I wonder, Amanda, if you could tell us first of all what your paper's about and how it came about.
So our paper is a review paper about how the microbiome affects aquatic health of fish species and other aquatic organisms, and really where we see the field needs to go and what we know now. So this paper kind of came about because our research group, as well as our collaborators on the paper, we have all been studying the gut microbiome of different fish species, zebrafish and largemouth bass in particular, and in our research trying to understand what is already known about these microbiomes of fish species, we found that there's a pretty significant gap in the literature, and so we wanted to kind of compile all of this information together for others to have a cohesive resource that they can come to understand what we know and what we need to know in order to advance the field.
And so what sort of information have you brought together? What are you talking about in the paper in that sense?
Yeah, so first we start by identifying what the microbiome is and different techniques that are used to study the microbiome, from 16S sequencing to metagenomics and then metatranscriptomics, and what questions we're allowed to answer using these methods. And then we take a look at 2 case studies. So we look at how nanoparticles and the Gulf oil spill have affected the microbiome of aquatic species. And then from there, we identify what gaps there are in the current literature and where we see the field needing to go. So kind of moving more towards functional identification of the microbiome and getting past just characterizing what is there.
And what sort of application do you see your paper having then?
So we think our paper can be used for those that are studying aquatic species and looking at a One Health approach of how the fish species might be impacted by different exposures, but additionally how their microbiomes might be impacted and how that works together to affect overall host health.
And personally, what does it mean to you being a recipient of this award?
I am very thankful to have received this award, and I want to acknowledge all of my co-authors. It was really a joint and collaborative effect, and we're just excited that other people are interested in the microbiome, and we really hope that this field kind of grows out of this.
Fantastic. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Great to hear, and many congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Well, that brings us to the end of our final programme from the SETAC North America 40th Annual Meeting. And what a fantastic week it's been. We've met a renowned author, discussed some of the hot topics here at the meeting, and taken a look at some of the work that's happening around the world. Don't worry though, you can keep watching online. But until next year, from all of the SETAC TV team, thank you for joining us, and bye-bye.